Good evening, everyone. I hate being kept behind a podium, so we're going to try to do this in a little bit different way. I am so happy to be able to tell you about an organization which I love. And I think many of you here have been or are still connected. Let's see. The ladies first. How many of you ladies here have been or still are members of the auxiliary? Would you please stand? Just stand. Okay, and how many of you here? And thank you. And how many of you here have been or still are members of the fire company? Please stand. I'm just curious. Some of these people, females and males, you're going to see in pictures. I have a ton of pictures. I have so many pictures. We could be here for about 10 years. I didn't think you wanted to sit that long, so we're going to roll through these, and I've done this a number of times. Of course, not speaking to an audience, but it's taken about a half hour, and it'll go a little bit longer because I'll go into some discussion. Maybe you have questions. As I was a teacher, I always encouraged my students to stop me and ask questions at a point where it was good to do this rather than wait. So please do that. If you have comments, memories, questions, whatever, as we roll through this, please stop me and ask or do the discussion. So now, as Don Goss mentioned to me just as we were getting started, one of the best ways, I think it's true, one of the best ways to get to know an area is to get to know its fire company, because it's definitely a part of the community if it lasts. And Linglestown Fire Company's been around for a long time. So we started in 1934, we were incorporated legally in 1936, and I'll give you a little bit of history before that time, and we'll move into the history up to the present time. But before we get started, I want to give credit to my great uncle, Nevin Moyer, my mother's uncle, who really kept the history up until the time when he died in 1950. And then it was progressively enlarged. The history was made bigger as we went. But my uncle was a great man. Some of you, I think, had him as a teacher. Are there any people here? I thought so. And I hear stories of this guy. You've heard people ask the question, if you could meet one person in your entire existence, from the past, the present, or the future, who would you want to meet? That's the guy I would want to meet. I would give anything to be able to talk to him for a half hour. I think someday in the future I'll be able to do that. But I would love to be able to talk to my uncle. I have heard so many stories about Nevin W. Moyer. It's amazing. And he was one of the charter members. In fact, before we go further, let me tell you a little bit about what's up here on the table. Because you have an assignment, before you leave tonight, you must come and see all these items. They're not just here for you to look at from a distance. There are mugs here from the fire company's history. I'll tell you a little bit about these two items here at the beginning. The first one, the first helmets we had on our 1941 Ford, a fire extinguisher the fire company sold. The first badge and the current badge of the fire company are there, and these are publications dealing with the fire company, its anniversaries, things like that. The very first minute book, on February 28th, 1934, the first meeting, is right there for you to look at. And the first log book, keeping a record of the members and the dues that they paid, 10 cents per month, and their attendance and things like that. And then there's a picture album here of all the pictures that I've been able to find of people connected to the fire company. So your assignment before you leave, now remember, is to come up here and just look through these items. We'll do that at the end. Okay, so this is the outline that I would like to go through. And I'm going to roll through this material, otherwise we'll be here for 10 years. We'll start before February of 34, because Linglestown was here. When was Linglestown founded? What year? 17? 65. Linglestown, well, we'll talk about that a little bit. So there were fires. There were people here, but there were no fire company activities to help these people. You'll see how that all worked. We'll go through that before the organization of the fire company. Then, from the beginning, from February 28, 1934, it all got started. I'll show you a number of things historically about our buildings, our apparatus. We'll look at the members, females and males. We'll look at some of the events of history dealing with the fire company, especially dealing with alarms and fatalities, things that we remember and some of you, many of you will remember too. And lastly, we're going to look at the future because we have an interesting future, I believe, and I'm curious if you agree. So let's begin. I don't know why I did that. Okay, so now starting to look at the past, I have here two items from the Pennsylvania National Fire Museum in Harrisburg that I brought with me. What is this? This is a leather, it's heavy. This is a leather fire bucket. Every home had one of these. When there was a fire, they would open their windows and toss it out. What would it be used for? Bucket brigade. Wherever the source of water was, to the source where the fire was, they would pass water, because this is long before there were pipes and things like that with municipal water systems. What is this?
An alarm, clacker, a rattle.
That's a rattle. It's called a rattle. Before the days of electricity, there would be someone on fire watch. And at nighttime, when people are sleeping, which still to this moment is the most dangerous time for fire, because people are sleeping. If there's a fire, they don't know it. And when people die in a fire, it's not because they burn, it's because the heat and the smoke and the gases affect them. And when they wake up and sit up, within a couple seconds, they're dead. The best way to prevent that, one way, what is it? A smoke alarm. If you don't have a smoke alarm in your home, that's your second assignment today. You get yourself a smoke alarm and put it outside your bedroom door. Well, at nighttime, way before there was electricity, this was how people would be notified at night. You're welcome to do this. Spin. It's better with two hands. Do you think that would get you awake at night? And that's what they were for. Some had bells on them. There were many different kinds of these devices, but their purpose, their sole purpose, is to get people awake at night. So now, during that time, during the early days, from 1765 up until when the Linglestown Fire Company got started, Linglestown was there. And it was one of three other communities total were our oldest. Middletown is the first, 1755. Then people moved north into Hummelstown following the Swab in 1763. What's the real name of Hummelstown? That's not its real name, although the name was officially changed. The real name of Hummelstown, Frederickstown. And it was confusing with Fredericksburg in Lebanon County. So it was named after Frederick Hummel. And the people eventually changed the name to Hummelstown instead of Frederickstown for Frederick Hummel. Linglestown, same way. What is the real name of Linglestown? Almost. Almost. The town of St. Thomas. All 5 words. The town of St. Thomas. We have the original parchment on sheepskin, Thomas Lingle's drawing of the town, where you see in script writing, the town of St. Thomas. And the floor plan, the land area drawn out of our village. So we were third. Hummelstown beat us by only 2 years. And that was the settlement in this whole part of Dauphin County where people lived. And when there were emergencies, That's where the people would respond from to help with the emergencies. There were news articles because there were newspapers. There's a news article from 1863 about a fire in Linglestown. Here's one from 1883. These are researchable today by researching through newspapers. These newspaper articles can be found. Here are newspaper articles just from the year 1922, long before Linglestown Fire Company got started. There were fires in Linglestown. There were emergencies in Linglestown, and help was needed. There was a time when people got together and formed a fire company called the Paxton Fire Company. You know the original name of Lower Paxton Township was what? Well, Paxton boys came from this area. This whole area was Paxton Township. And every municipality that you can think of around us, all the townships, all the boroughs, all of the city, all those areas broke away from Paxton Township, and the last remaining chunk is our chunk, Lower Paxton Township. So all the municipalities going north, going south, east, west, they all broke away from the original Paxton Township, and we're what's left. So our chunk is the original last part of Old Paxton Township. During that time, people in Linglestown formed a fire company called the Paxton Fire Company, and it lasted almost until the turn of the century. Then it folded. And during that time, from Hummelstown, they bought a hand pumper. If you get into the National Fire Museum on 4th Street in Harrisburg, you'll see a number of these. They were very ingenious, but they were extremely labor intensive. It took a lot of people to operate them, to operate the pumps back and forth, and also then the bucket brigade had to be organized to bring water to put into the tub. But this is a replica of what the Paxton Fire Company had before it folded near the turn of the century. So now, as the village continued to grow, there were movements to do things. Here was a little bit of a historical item on a festival that was held to try to raise money for a fire company, but nothing came from it. Also, in the early 1900s, if there was an emergency, the fire service had to come from Harrisburg or from Progress or from Pembroke because they had fire companies. They were moving out from the city. Now imagine in the early 1900s, this is before mechanical devices as we have today, vehicles, how long it would take by horse or by pulling fire apparatus from those areas to Linglestown. And the roads were not what they are today. So this was a challenge. And there were times when this had to occur. There was a barn destroyed in Linglestown in February 34. And from that fire, the people in the town got together and decided it's time to have a fire company. So on February the 28th, 1934, Linglestown Fire Company began. There is record of this material. There was an organizational meeting, the first charter meeting, which is here in the book. 44 members of the village were in attendance, and the monthly dues, as I mentioned earlier, were $10 plus a 25-cent initiation fee. That seems like not much today, but 1935, that was a little more money. We always have to keep that in perspective when we hear about prices and so forth from the past, because of inflation, things were different. So now in the minute book, this is part of what you'll see in the minute book of the first meeting, February 28th, 1934. The charter members that existed, 44 people. Our last charter member was Eddie Didler, who died here just a few years ago. He was in his 90s. So these are the 44 people that got together and started the fire company. I'll show you some pictures a little bit later of some of these people.
What was the asterisk for?
Oh, the asterisks, that page is from the red book that's here on the table from the 25th anniversary of the fire company. The asterisk showed members of the charter members that had passed away at that time. But I'll update that list. You'll see this a little bit later. There was a news article the next day, the very next day, March the 1st, 1934, announcing that Linglestown will have a fire company. So the news spread rather rapidly. Then, shortly thereafter, we got our first fire truck, the Model T Ford. And that came from Elizabethville. We bought it from Eville, and it was housed in a little barn garage behind the Victorian house next to the United Methodist Church. The Victorian house you see there, you recognize the house. Behind that, on the alley, was a barn that had become a garage, and that's where they stored this Model T. And eventually then it was moved. Here was a picture in the Harrisburg paper of this fire truck. You see Linglestown, PA on the side, when we had purchased the truck and put it in service. And these were all charter members here that are standing. They're identified, pardon me, they're identified here in the caption of the picture. Then the firehouse was moved. The garage was moved behind the old post office, or Dr. Dinneman's dental office, right across the street on Mountain Road. Oh, thanks, Joe. Right across the street on Mountain Road from what is today that convenience store. This was our post office in town for a period of time. And back on the alley, there was another building, a garage, where the firehouse, it was used as a firehouse where this fire truck was stored. And then eventually, the township started to get involved with us. They gave us $100. Now that's not much today. It was a lot more in 1934. But the township started to recognize the need for a fire company and to help with the finances. Then we moved to the big fire station that we have today, which was the old high school. This started in 1937. There was a mortgage taken for this. And here's a picture of that building as it was converted into the fire station. Door was created. Downstairs there were classrooms. Upstairs there were classrooms. That became the meeting room upstairs with a kitchen in the front. And downstairs was the garage where the 41 Ford then was kept, and that also the Model T. Now I call your attention to, if you look closely, at the top of the door, there's a little sign there that identified the building as the fire company. We still have that sign. Nobody sees this, and it's very obvious. As you go into the firehouse from the east side into the small meeting room, above the door jamb, is that sign. So when you're down in that area, you take a quick look, and you'll see the sign. That's the sign that was above the main garage door into the firehouse in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. There was a newspaper article from the Harrisburg paper tracing the history of the schools in Linglestown, and that this building had become the fire company when that occurred in 1934, just after we started the fire company. Electric lights then were installed. Electricity comes to Linglestown, and we had electricity. The Ladies Auxiliary was formed with 8 charter members. We'll see more about that as we go. And their monthly dues was also $10, about 10 cents a month. Spittoons were purchased. I thought that was cool. I would love to see one, but I don't know that any of them exist. But at that time, that was, I'm sure, a necessity. That had to be. So February the 8th, 1939, they bought spittoons for the firehouse. And then the first fire station siren was installed in 1939 for $37.50. That was the charge for the first siren. Where was the siren? On top of the Eagle Hotel. And there was an alarm box right there on the corner. We'll talk more about that as we go. Okay, so now the fire company was responsible for running the town's 175th anniversary. And from that event, the profit that came was used to buy the 1941 Ford, which cost $2,099.18. An interesting item, it's in the minutes. No, I'm fine. There was a vote as to what color the fire truck should be. Fire trucks are normally what color?
Red.
That's a horrible color. Do you know why? You can't see it at night. That is a horrible color for a fire truck. We went through a brief period, not in Linglestown, but some fire companies with yellow fire trucks. We call them slime yellow or slime green. And then you don't see too much of that anymore. White is really a good color, daytime and especially at nighttime. So white beat red by a vote of 18 to 10. And as a result, all of our equipment, to the very present day, our equipment is white. Our fire company color in the township is blue. Paxtonia is red, Colonial Park is green. So when you see their equipment, you'll see Scotch light today of either red, green, or blue. And we have some of those colors too on some of our equipment so that we can identify where these things go at the scene of a fire. So we picked white, and our fire truck arrived. And that truck is still there today. You see it usually in Memorial Day Parade and one other time.
Santa Claus.
Well, if there's a funeral, sometimes we're involved in carrying the casket.
Santa Claus ride.
Santa Claus, my first memory of the fire company when I was a little kid, was out at Jerry's Superette, if you knew where that was on Route 39. I lived right next door to it, and we would wait on the night that Santa Claus was to come on the fire truck. And I remember this, riding on that old 41. Now, look closely. That's the factory picture of the 41. There is something wrong.
Linglestown.
I thought we could go
They spelled it Linglestown. Linglestown. And there was even a Harrisburg newspaper article about this. That when our fire truck came, it had the wrong name. It was misspelled. So, the current fire truck, when it was corrected, was spelled Linglestown. Now, if you look very closely, you'll be able to see a difference in the lettering here and here. And on the hood, here and here. Because they changed the lettering at the beginning. Can you see that? There's a little bit of a difference in the color of the letters when they corrected the spelling. And we still have the 41 today. Just after World War II started, the firehouse became a location for signing up for the draft. And maybe, were any of you involved in that? Probably not. You were too young. But that's where people would go in the area to sign up to get involved with the military. Right after the war ended, there was a huge ceremony, the welcome home ceremony for the military people in all of the townships around us, but the ceremony was in Linglestown, and there was a huge parade from which a profit of $550 came. These are some pictures of in the old rotogravure section of the Harrisburg paper. They were brown in color. Some of you would remember that. And I'm curious, I would love to know what was happening here. That's my uncle on top of a horse, and all the people are looking back. Meatball, were you there? Were you doing something? This is in the square. This is in the square. But something was going on. Everyone turned around to look.
Probably I was in trouble again.
I think that was the case. Yeah, I think you were just a little kid there, but you probably did something wrong, set off a firecracker or something. Okay. All right, so we move on. Now, we bought some land. We bought this, what is today the parking lot on the east side of the firehouse. We bought that piece of ground for $1,000. That became parking for the fire company. We started allowing people, giving them the opportunity, if necessary, to signal an alarm. There was a little alarm box placed in front of the hotel and one on the front of the fire station. Both of those now are gone because people just call in. If there's an alarm, what's the number? 911. Everybody knows this. So those alarm boxes were taken. When we did the town project a few years ago, the pole and the alarm box was still there in front of the Eagle Hotel. But when they redid all that area of the square, then that was removed. Do you have the box? Oh, cool. Okay, this little box with a button in it.
That's right.
Excellent, I didn't know that. This is Bill Pataricus, if you don't know Bill Pataricus, who is the proprietor of the Eagle Hotel. Hey, Coons Park was purchased. Coons Park was owned by, I think, Pete Coons, had his cattle there in a pasture. And the fire company and Pete worked together. Pete wanted the town to have a park. So the fire company took this over, but they had great difficulty running this. We bought more land, you'll see this as we go. And eventually it will be disposed of. The fire police were created. We are one of the few fire companies in the whole area today that still have a fire police that assist at the scene to help firefighters, to keep us out of danger of the public and keep the public out of the danger of the fire, and also assist the regular police officers. They're called fire police. We have a very active fire police organization today. And that's when they were started in 1948, just after the war. Now, additional land was purchased. Coons Park was expanded into a park for the town. It was the town's park owned by the fire company. The first festival was held that became carnivals. I am sure, I would think the vast majority of you, let's just by hands, how many of you have been to a fire company carnival? This was a big thing. If you remember, it started on Memorial Day. We had the first carnival. When the Memorial Day parade was over, that afternoon the carnival opened for a week. The original ones were at Coons Park, then they were moved down to the fire company. You'll see some pictures coming up. Marl Senior was fire chief. This is from the 50s. And he had this old, Butch, what's the year we found?
39.
What's it? Butch, where are you?
I'm here, but I don't know.
Okay,
I think Meatball might know.
39. That's what you-
okay, 1939. Now, if you look closely,
Knows everything. Yeah.
Norm Sr. made a pickup truck out of this car. So there's a little pickup body in the back, and it had red lights here on the top. And I can remember him driving from the body shop, which is still there, on Mountain Road, down to the firehouse when we had an alarm. And he wasn't a slow driver. I remember seeing him streaking through the square down to the firehouse. That picture is down at Carl's Body Shop today. But Norm Sr., as fire chief, operated that car. 1954, we had a reservoir. This is long before we had water in the town. They created a reservoir, 200,000 gallons of water, by damming up that lowland, which is right behind the pottery shop along Linglestown Road. This is south of the pottery shop, and I just took that picture. You see the date. And you can really see where that little reservoir was, where we could get water if we needed water in the town. And the fire company did that. This was our second piece of new equipment, although it wasn't new, but this was a tank truck. It was a fuel truck that was purchased and became our first tanker. We still today supply water to many fire companies. We're one of the few fire companies that has a tanker that can supply water. We go all over the area. Outside the county we travel to supply water to areas that don't have water. This was our first tank truck, an old GMC. It was a fuel truck. We made it into a water truck. You'll see what happens to it in time. First phones were installed in the fire company, 1955. Now, we had two pieces of equipment, the 41 Ford and the tanker. Where do we keep them? There was only place for one. So they broke ground for a new building. And that building, which is still standing today, was added in 1955 with 3 bays. So we were thinking ahead. We had the 41 Ford and the 55 GMC tanker. And that was built. The bell, which we're still debating where that bell came from that's in that tower, is still there today. I'm curious, does anyone know for sure where that bell came from? Nobody knows this. We cannot discover where that bell came from. When you drive by the firehouse, look, you'll see the bell. Many people pass there every day and never notice that bell. And it came from somewhere, I just don't know where. So if anybody discovers that, keep me in mind. This was let's see, oh, this is the organization of the Ambulance Association, which today is South Central Ambulance. It started with the 3 fire companies going together and creating the Lower Paxton Township Volunteer Firemen's Ambulance Association. The first ambulance was an old Buick. Well, old today. It wasn't then, in 1948. And then they started using Cadillacs, and now they use the much more elaborate and bigger ambulances because of all the equipment that is carried today. But that started by firefighters. You had to be a fireman, you had to be a firefighter to belong to the Ambulance Association to respond to calls. And today that's South Central Ambulance, started April the 10th, 1957. Alarm dispatching starts from Dauphin County. We start having a county-wide dispatching center, which today is very much involved in everything that's going on. Calls would come to Zimmerman's funeral home. He would go outside and ring the alarm, and then people would respond. So people could call the county, report a fire, and then they would notify Zimmerman's, who would then activate the alarm there at the hotel. And that lasted for quite a while. Now, we buy more land, and Coons Park becomes what it is today, that size. The size that it is today is as a result of this third purchase of land in 1958. We buy a new fire truck. Now we have something for the third bay of the firehouse. A 1961 Ford BRUCO. BRUCO is Broomball Body Works in Altoona. And that was our first modern fire truck. And again, of course, the color white. You'll always see that as we buy equipment, it will be white. And that $18,850, which today is, you can pay for the tires. It's just amazing.
Tell them what the new truck's gonna call.
Oh yes, well you'll see this. You'll see this coming up. Now, we bought our first 2 SCBAs, other than Brian. What does SCBA stand for? Or you might know SCUBA, SCUBA. But what do those letters stand for?
Self-contained breathing apparatus.
Self-contained breathing apparatus. The U is self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. So we went modern. And one of my very first fire drills, I remember, is when we were training on the new SCUBAs that we had purchased so we could go into a building when there was a fire. Before this time, the technique of firefighting was called surround and drowned. Surround and drown. You encircled the fire and doused it with water. Surround and drown. It was too dangerous to go inside. Now we could go inside. And the turnout gear, what we wear, and all that has changed because of going into the scenes now where it's very hot and also quite dangerous. But this started in 1965 with us obtaining our SCBAs, we call them. The first convention was held. The book is here. When Linglestown was celebrating its anniversary, we celebrated with having the Dauphin County Volunteer Firemen's Convention in town. The proceeds were used to pay off that new pumper. The book is up here that shows all the things from that convention. Then we had the bicentennial in 1965. Linglestown was 200 years old, and we had a massive parade. I'm sure many of you here will remember that parade. It was an entire week's event. It was an amazing time when people got together and had a blast. And the fire company sponsored the entire event. Who was the chairman?
Carlton Gardner.
Carlton Gardner. You'll see a picture of him later. One of our founding members. Mighty Carlton. Okay, now we needed more room. The fire company was becoming more and more involved in the community, and the community was becoming more and more involved with the fire company. So we added the east and the south addition. That's one picture of it before it was enclosed. We did a little bit of remodeling and we enclosed this area. Now you enter up here. This was a breezeway when the building was first built. Then the back with the big social room, which today is called St. Thomas Room. People say, why St. Thomas? What is all this St. Thomas stuff? Well, you know, the town of St. Thomas. But a lot of people don't understand that history. So this was a big step for us. There was a lot of celebrating. This was the groundbreaking. Some people here you might know, Moose Milligan, Tony Menito, Kermit Yingst. Kermit was president. Tony was vice assistant chief, and Moose was the building chairman. Kermit is still living, correct?
It's not.
Or he has died.
Yeah.
Well, Kermit passed away. So Moose is still living. This was the architect. Harry Cordial.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he's living. So in any case, Moose is still around, and Tony just passed away in November.
Yeah.
So Moose is still here from that picture. Okay, so now the new building was built. We took a $56,000 loan, and we paid it off in 7 years. We were so happy about this, and we worked hard. And many of you helped us do that. That was really a record to pay off that much money in 7 years. And it all came from support from the people in the community, which still today we have this kind of support. Brian, do you remember what that vehicle was called?
That's all wild.
No, I don't remember.
This was called the Death Coach,
Yeah, it's that-
because the steering in it was terrible. You could almost make a complete circle as you were driving with the steering. This was our first attempt at having an equipment vehicle. We didn't keep it very long. It was a used bread truck, as I recall, and it still exists today behind the pottery shop. So if you go back to see where the reservoir was, you'll see this vehicle sitting in the field. It's still there. I don't have the dates for this, but I do remember very well, we called it the Death Coach.
That come from the Paxton Herald, they gave it to us.
Oh, it came from the Paxton Herald?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
yeah.
And it was a bread truck then before that? Okay,
Dauphin Herald was it all?
okay, yep. So it's still there. You can go see that if you're curious. Okay, so now, we bought a tanker to replace the GMC tanker, a brand new tanker, also BRUCO, Broomball Body Works from Altoona. $27,000. When the new tanker arrived, we paid for it. It was completely paid for. That was very unusual in the 70s. To have that much money, a fire company would have that much money to be able to do that. Now, I want to tell you something here. This is something that your fire company does. There'll be 3 examples of this. You'll see 2 more. When we bought the tanker, that's what it looked like. That carries a huge amount of water, 1,500 gallons. We decided we wanted to have a stainless steel tank instead of a steel tank, so we could carry water that was drinkable. Rather than buy a new truck, we just bought a new tank. Here's the original truck. Just look. So it went through a metamorphosis. There's a pump panel. Here are the compartments, the whole cab. Now we added some things, but the cab and the chassis we recycled. And we put a new back on it with a stainless steel tank. In 1990, we changed the chassis. We kept the tank. So rather than buy 2 new pieces of equipment, we just recycled them at a big savings. We'll do this 2 more times. You'll see where this works. It saves money. And the vehicles were in good condition. So why get rid of them? We just recycled them. And it worked. So that's the first example you'll see of 3. Now my favorite. We bought a new pumper. We got rid of the 1961 BRUCO. This was our first custom pumper made by Young in New York State. And we pioneered a new idea. We are still the only fire company in the area, all of Dauphin County and outside, that has a top-mounted pump panel. There it is. Normally, a pump panel is on the driver's side. If you can picture this in your mind. Driver gets out of the cab, right there are all the controls. The disadvantage of this is if the activity is on the other side of the truck, the driver who's operating everything can see nothing, unless he's Superman and has X-ray vision. With a top-mounted pump panel, the driver is up there all by himself and has complete 360-degree visibility. We pioneered this idea, and we are still the only fire company in the whole area that has this kind of equipment. This truck has been replaced, and every piece that has replaced it, including what we have today, has a top-mounted pump. You'll see this. And I really like this. I became a driver very quickly, and I loved it. The disadvantage to this is that they're more expensive, and they make the truck longer because there has to be room for that pump panel. So a lot of fire companies don't do this. They don't have the money to spend for a top-mounted pump, and they don't want a bigger fire truck for garage space and things like that. But I think the advantages are tremendous. Plus the driver's away from all the hose, all the water. It's just great. I remember one time, Brian Woodall was on top of a ladder bailing water into a building, and the water pressure caused him to go backwards on the ladder when he would have fallen off. You were up on the second story. I was on that pump panel and I saw him starting to move and shut down the line. If I had been on a regular fire truck with the pump panel on the driver's side, I never would have seen this. And Brian could be in his second life today, who knows?
I actually owe Bill that because the fire was, of course he's running the pumper and I was getting like 3,000 pounds of pressure on that hose. But
No, it wasn't that bad.
No, it wasn't that bad. But there was fire coming out of it as well, and all of a sudden I was falling. But Bill was watching the fire ground very well, and I got caught up in the ladder, and when I turned, I could see where I was going, which is these concrete steps. And I was able to put my arms up over my face. Why I needed to protect his face, I had no idea. But when I landed, then the hose fell down right beside me, so it didn't fly around.
Right.
And
So
what
I'd swear for the value of a top-mounted pump panel.
And what also made it memorable was my first year wedding anniversary.
Oh, that day.
That day. And
I watched him go by in the ambulance,
Yeah.
didn't know it was him.
because I broke a couple ribs and I dislocated a wrist and stuff. And our first was we went out to eat for our first wedding anniversary as I leaned because I couldn't sit up straight. But yeah, it
But you
was.
saved him.
But,
I'm very happy to say also, just as a side note, Brian's wife Teresa is here. Teresa was a student of mine at Lower Dauphin who somehow got connected to Brian. But I got Brian connected to the fire company through Teresa.
yeah,
So it was cool. This is a long story. There are many stories like this in the fire service. Many, many services.
Bill introduced me to the fire department in 1976 was when I joined. And this year will be 44 years.
You're that old.
Yes, I am.
Gosh. Wow. Okay, we have to move on. We can talk about these things forever. Now, the GMC tanker, the white old GMC gasoline truck, was sold to New Buffalo Fire Company for $1. We never cashed the check. So they got the tanker for $1. They gave us a check, a real bank check for $1. We had it framed and we never cashed the check. I thought that was kind of cool. Okay, now, the 1975 pumper arrives. We had a housing with the tanker and the pumper. That tanker that I showed you, the new tanker that went through the metamorphosis, we had a double housing. Now, if you've never been to a housing, oh, it's fun. A housing is based on a colonial religious activity of pushing in and pulling out the fire truck 3 times to give it a blessing for the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Today we still do housings, only the fire equipment is much heavier. So in the fire truck, the driver sits, but they have to push it in. And then it's pulled out, they have to push it in the second time, and it's pulled out, and they have to push it in the third time. And we have done this numerous times. We had a double housing because we had 2 new pieces of fire equipment. And this was a big event. We had a county meeting at the firehouse to do this. And part of the meeting that night was the housing. So that was kind of a cool event.
Who's in the front? Who's in the front?
I'm sorry?
Who's in the front?
I don't know that. I don't know who's there.
That's me on the left.
Well, that's you, Brian.
On the left, driving.
Okay, is that Craig?
I don't know who was with me, but I'm driving.
Okay, I took the picture.
Sorry. It's me driving.
Oh, you were driving?
Yes.
Oh, then that's you.
Very good.
Okay, then. Well, you said on the left. So I looked
Okay, it's the driver's side.
at. Got it. Okay. Well, it's a white shirt, so that's an indication it's one of the chief officers. It was probably the fire chief at that time. Okay, going on. Now we got a new pumper. We're in 1982, and we got a 1982 pumper, brand new. This pumper was so amazing. Within about a week of its arrival, it was taken to Philadelphia as a model at the International Fire Chiefs Association Convention. This was the pumper, top-mounted pump. This was such a unique piece of equipment. It was put on display at that international convention from little, beautiful downtown Linglestown. And we were very proud of that. This was a Pierce pumper. Came from Wisconsin, from Pierce Manufacturing, and it was a really great fire truck. Really great. And of course, white. Okay, going on. Now, another county convention. This becomes the biggest county convention ever in history for Dauphin County. We had 71 classes of judged fire equipment and 177 trophies. And every one of those trophies was donated by people and businesses in the community. We didn't pay $1 for a trophy. And we had a massive convention parade in 1984 in honor of our 50th anniversary. The book is up here. The second anniversary book is up here for you to look through. Now, second example of metamorphosis. We bought a dealer truck that had already been in use as a display vehicle. It is an air generating electricity unit. It has a huge generator and a massive compressor to fill the air cylinders that we wear on the back. In 1988, we bought that vehicle. It was red. Eventually, it was painted. Now, that vehicle, eventually, the International was sold. The chassis was sold. We bought a new chassis. We kept the unit here. And we still have it today. It has a no, we still have that chassis.
Yes,
That chassis is still there.
yes.
But this was a second example of saving money by changing the vehicle only partially. We bought a new chassis. This unit responds all over central Pennsylvania. Nobody has equipment like this. It has a huge electric generator and it has a huge compressor to put air into cylinders. This week, did you hear all the sirens all over the place? Even with some fatalities, not here. Massive fires. Our air unit was responding to all these calls. It is a massive piece of equipment. We have unique equipment. We have so many different facets of what we do for the fire service. I get excited about that when I think about it. Because regular fire companies aren't able really to say this. We can, and I'm very proud of that. Okay, now the township gets involved, as it is now doing, because fire equipment has become so expensive nobody can afford it. So the fire companies now within the township are getting assistance from the township to buy equipment. The first piece of equipment they bought was a tower truck. Massive fire truck. It was assigned initially to Paxtonia because we didn't have room for it. Then we built a new building, which is our second building that is there today. This is construction picturing of that building, which today is brown. We put another covering on the building. Now we have place for 8 pieces of equipment just in that building. With the other bays in the original building, we have today 16 pieces of equipment. 16. Including the 41 Ford, which doesn't respond to alarms. But there aren't many organizations that can say this. This is your fire company, the Linglestown Fire Company #1. Now we have room for the tower truck. So, the tower truck was brought to Linglestown. It originally had red Scotch light for Paxtonia. All we did was put blue Scotch light on top of it and change the lettering and the numbering. We're station number 35 in the county. There are 40-some stations in the county. We're station 35. So that became, now we became an aerial fire company. We could do aerial work in addition to all the other things we were doing with tankers, with pumpers, and with the engines. So our faceting continues to grow, and along with the new building. Now, here's the third example of a metamorphosis. I think this is really cool. We wanted to get into something like a some rescue work. We wanted to carry more firefighters to a scene. So from the community over in Swab Township of Enhaut, we bought their squad unit, a Dodge unit. We sold the chassis. We kept the box. We bought a New York City pumper from New York City, from the fire department of New York. We bought a pumper. Imagine a pumper body here with hose and all that. We got rid of the body. We took that body and put it on the chassis. And that became our first squad and eventually became a rescue because we got into the rescue business. Our faceting continued. And of course it's white with blue Scotch lighting. I think that's pretty cool what we did there. And at a great savings. And we had a very workable piece of fire equipment. A Mack, our first Mack. I think, yes, our first Mack. Okay, big time. Linglestown goes on the map. We had a governor's debate. In 1994, for the election for governor, in our news station, we had a big debate with Tom Ridge running for governor, Marl Singel, who was lieutenant governor under Casey, Peg Luhsih, Tim Holloway, and Patrick Fallon. They were minor party candidates for governor. They had a big live television debate all across the state from Linglestown, Pennsylvania. This was big time. We had a lot of press coverage on this. There are the 5 candidates sitting. An ABC commentator came to run the debate. Here we are in our uniforms, putting everything together. This was really big time for Linglestown. The Paxton Herald had headlines about our candidates' debate. She mentions 4, but really there were 5 candidates. We changed all around. We had hundreds of chairs for the public to sit. There were networks there with all their satellite. It was really cool. We had this big debate. Did any of you attend that? Do any of you remember being there? It was big time for Linglestown, Pennsylvania. It's great. I loved it. Okay. 1998. We're moving into the present time. We bought more land, the land between the 2 buildings. So now we have training area and we have additional parking. When we had big events in the social hall at the St. Thomas Room for $150,000. There had been a little house sitting there. The house was torn down. And now we have this open land between the 2 buildings that we use really quite often. The township purchases for us 2 new pieces of equipment. A new pumper to replace the Pierce, the one that went to the convention, and a new tower truck to replace the Sutphan that came from Paxtonia. We had 2 new pieces of equipment. We called them twins. The cab up, they were the same. So the tower truck and the pumper in the back with a top-mounted pump panel. We dedicated, at the same time, we had a double housing again for 2 new pieces of equipment. This was the second time we housed 2 new pieces of equipment. Then shortly thereafter, we bought a beast. This is a 4-wheel drive mountain vehicle. It's 4-wheel drive and it climbs the mountain where there are no roads. It is amazing, the power and the stamina of that piece of fire equipment. We initially bought it for Forest Hills. The development of Forest Hills, above Continental Drive, there is no water. So in bad weather, up on the mountain, this is a very difficult area to get to, and we've had some bad fires up there. So this piece is a first responder to get there with 4-wheel drive. It carries 5-inch hose, that big yellow hose that is supply line only, and it responds many places where there are field fires and things like that, where the regular equipment can't go. So here again, unique fire equipment, another facet of what we do for our community. And now our newest piece of equipment, look at the price. Oh, I don't have the price. There it is, $575,000. The township bought that for us. So the township now owns these pieces of equipment. We own that one I just showed you, the brush truck we call it, that 4-wheel drive, and we own the tanker and some other pieces too. But the more expensive things now our township is buying with your help, because it's tax money that goes into all this. Paxtonia and Colonial Park also receive fire equipment from the township, which we are very grateful for. So this is our newest piece. It's a KME, right there, which is, the K stands for? Kovach. Fire equipment in Nesquehoning, Pennsylvania, up in the coal regions. They make fire equipment that goes all over the world. It's a world-class fire equipment producer right here in our own state. And we have now, I think, 4 pieces of KME equipment. They do really nice work. Our new tower truck that's coming, I'll show you in a moment, will be a KME. Okay, one last item, 2 last items, and we're done with pictures of history. We went through a 4-year change. In the firehouse, we've always had a bar, which it was a club, kind of closed, and they have gone now on their own. They have their own home association, as the Legion does. If you know the Linglestown Legion, they have a home association, which is separate from the Legion, that runs that kind of activity. Have any of you been to their meals at the FHB, the Firehouse Bar? They're running activities for us, and the profits go into the fire company. But it's a separate organization. It took us 4 years to do this. This was really a complicated procedure. But now they are separate. The Linglestown Fire Company #1 no longer has a bar. It is a separate organization. Okay. And lastly, we have coming, which will come probably near the end of this coming summer, a brand new tower truck. $1,392,000. I don't have pictures of it yet because it's being built. But you'll see it, and it will replace the current KME that we have, the current tower truck that we have. So we'll have a new tower truck with the help of the township, for which we are very grateful. Okay, now, next topic, members, the leaders of our auxiliary. These ladies, here again, a uniqueness of our fire company. We have an active auxiliary. Almost no fire company today has an auxiliary. We do. And some of our ladies who were standing earlier, these are the ones with the star. These are people that are deceased. Are some of the charter members and some of the members that are still very active today. Some of whom are here. Let me introduce you to Donna Burkheim. And Jerry Hartman, back here. Put your hands up. Donna and Jerry. And Edie's here also, of course. 3 of our most active auxiliary members. Without our ladies, we would be in trouble. Guys need women. You just have to have women. And boy, do they do a job for us. They are so, if you have, I would think the vast majority of you have been to the soup sales. The ladies always have a massive bake sale, and they run the kitchen, as well as many other things they do for us too. Now, I put together a list of the top 35 firefighters. 35 because that's our station number. Again, the ones with the stars are deceased members. Many of those people were charter members. There are many of you here that will recognize names on that list. And these are just amazing people that I have had the privilege of rubbing elbows with. Most of these people, not all of them, but most of them, going back to 1934. How many of you see names on there that you recognize? More than 10. More than 10 names you recognize. These are the leaders of our company up to the present day. Just as with the auxiliary. Let me introduce you to some. Jim Buffington, Buffy or Shorty Buffington. How many of you knew the mayor of Linglestown? Jim Buffington, what a character. He proposed me in the fire company. It's all due to Jim. I give him the credit. With the bicentennial in 1965, I was helping put banners across the street. I wasn't a member. And Buffy said, why don't you join the fire company? I was 18. And I joined. He's the one that proposed. Craig Coyne, one of our fire chiefs. I love this picture. I think that is such a good picture of Craig. If you know Craig Coyne, there are times when Craig is like this. And he was a great chief. Craig was just an excellent chief. I could tell you many stories. Ed Crum, president, chief, banquet director, just all kinds of things. If there's not a star, these people are still living. Carlton Gardner, founding member. Ed Dibler, our last charter member, just passed away a couple of years ago at the age of 91, I think he was. Archie Hammaker, Ruth McNeil. I couldn't separate the picture. She really should be with the auxiliary. She was, I think she was treasurer, was she not? And Archie was our treasurer. And there was some activity going on here where the ladies were giving money to us. And that picture was taken. Harry Freisinger, treasurer of the fire company for about 500 years. He was treasurer for so long. Brian Hench, recent fire chief, knowledgeable man, good worker with people, great guy. These are just excellent people. Chuck Hoffer, our current treasurer. He's been treasurer, I think, for about 20 years. Something like that. Dick McNeil, Meatball. He's here. Put your hand up. I would think most of you know Dick, don't you? If you don't, what you're missing. Yeah, what you are missing. I've known Dick as long as I've been alive. As long as I have memories, I knew Dick McNeil. Meatball, we know him as. Okay, Moose, Walter Milligan, still living, massive fire chief, director of everything, in charge of the big building project when we added the building to the south. Great guy. Been around for a long, long time. Ran bingo all many years. That we had bingo until the casino put us out of business. But he was our bingo chairman. Harry Little, fire police officer. Harry was a great guy. Recently died. He was our Santa Claus for many years. He had to put a little padding in there. But other than that, he was a great Santa. Just great Santa. Tony Minito just recently died. He's our most recent member that passed away just after Thanksgiving, I think, Dick? Is that right? Just after Thanksgiving. Great man, fire officer, president, held many positions in the fire company. My great uncle, Nevin Moyer, I wish to this day I could meet him. I'm just so eager to meet this man. Tim Wilmert, fire chief, line officer, administrative officer in the fire company, and still living. These are great people that made our fire company what it is today. Bill Payne, our current fire chief. 10 years Bill has been chief, I think. 11. I think he's been chief longer than anybody else. Great man, very knowledgeable, just knows, he has seniority in the whole area. Nobody's been chief in any fire company in this area that long. Ralph Swenson recently passed away. He was our cook when we would do catering. Ralph would make the best filling balls. People would come to our firehouse for banquets only for the filling. I don't know what he did. Bill Twilley, fire police officer. This is during the Santa Run. He really doesn't have antlers coming out of his head. This was during the Santa Run. Harry Pirish, fire chief, very knowledgeable. Now employed, has been for years at HAC at their public safety center. He has moved up and has all kinds of responsibility. Dale Steiner, living up in Perry County today, fire chief, executive officer, just great man. And Brian Woodall. You had hair back then, yes? And that was when he was one of the chief officers. He has a white shirt on. Okay. Now, another category, events. How are we doing on time? Oh, a little bit past where I thought we'd be. The events, many things we do. Please skim over the fundraising. We are so busy raising money. There are fire companies today that have no public facilities in their building. They can do nothing with the public. We're involved with the public all the time. And you make us what we are. Well, you can see the kinds of things we've done. Collecting coins and coin cards. Do some of you remember the quarter coin cards? I would love to have one. If any of you have a quarter coin card, I would love to have it for our collection. So keep me in mind. Let's see. The fire extinguishers sold, I have one up here on the table. They were carbon monoxide extinguishers. Dick McNeil just told me he still has his. So these are things here for you to see. Okay, to show you some things of these, just some pictures. We train all the time. It's one of the biggest hassles today in finding firefighters. There is so much training that is necessary. Before, we would surround and drown. Now it's very complicated. Firefighting is the second most deadly occupation in America. Second. What's first?
Farming.
No? Mining. Underground mining is very dangerous. Firefighting is second. Very dangerous activity. So we train, and we train very hard. Fire prevention. We do things with kids, with fire prevention. I love this picture. That's me sitting Indian style with a group of kindergarten kids talking about what firemen look like. You see the fireman's helmet? That was my helmet. And we talk about this with children because they get scared when they see a fireman. At a fire scene, if they're in the building and a fireman comes in, now imagine a little kid. We have this mask on. We're completely covered. They can see nothing about the person. And here we are with those tanks. They run and hide, which is the worst thing they should do. So we try to show children they shouldn't be afraid. We have them wear the equipment and become accustomed to it. That's part of fire prevention. Our parades. This was the old trolley. It was on an old Ford chassis. We used to dress up as women. Do you recognize this person?
Don't go there.
Do you recognize this person?
You.
That's Jim Buffington. Do you recognize this person? That's me. I was in one of my sister's dresses. And we had this huge group. We were a comedy group that would go to parades with our trolley, and we would parade. Now, today, that's probably not so acceptable. So, quite a while ago, we stopped doing this. But now we still parade. You see us in parades. And we wear our Class A uniforms, and we really like to dress up and show off with all our equipment. So parading is still something we really like to do. We used to have pumping contests at the Columbia Park Mall in front of Sears. The 3 township companies would alternate years. where different teams would come and they would, on timing, race to hook up, they'd get dressed first in their gear, hook up the fire truck, flow water and knock off bowling pins off of barrels and things like that. And there was prize money and things like that, called a pumping contest. We still have a blood drive. We still do this. If any of you ever, or you know someone that needs blood, we have a massive blood bank that people can pull from at no cost. It's for the community, not just for us. Our blood bank is for the community. So if you ever know of anyone who needs blood, all they have to do is tell the hospital they take credit from Linglestown Fire Company. We have hundreds of units that are credited to our blood bank. So just remember that in the future. 4th of July fireworks, aren't they great? Wow, we have such a great show. The biggest event in Linglestown every year is the fireworks. Thousands of people come from all over. It's amazing. And then it's fun to watch them go through the roundabouts. I love it. I go up there and just sit and watch how well that works in the square. As long as the traffic's moving, everybody just keeps moving. Do you like the roundabouts?
Yeah.
Oh, I love them. I love the roundabouts. People now see what they're all about. Okay, that's a whole other story. Soup sales, Santa Claus, carnivals, all these kinds of things were items that either we raised money from or we did things for the public. With the Santa Claus runs, which we still do, all day on a Sunday. We have, I think, almost 40 stops we make. And people come out with hot chocolate and cookies, kids give Santa lists that they want for Christmas. It is such a great event between us and our community. It is, do you remember this as a kid, when you were smaller? I very well, as I said earlier, I remember this. Okay, now, alarms. Our biggest alarm ever in our territory was the Blue Ridge Country Club. I'll show you pictures in a moment. Unusual alarms. Every fire company has unusual alarms. Rescuing cats from a tree. You hear those stories. Well, we've had them too. The Blue Ridge Country Club. Massive, massive fire. The biggest fire Linglestown Fire Company ever had within our territory. Now this is where Blue Ridge Village is going. They built a new building. That building has been torn down. And Blue Ridge Village now is going in there. It's a planned community with many, many, many different things that will be in there. That was our biggest alarm. Massive, massive fire. Unusual fires. Picture in your mind Sports City. Just after you pass going towards the city on Linglestown Road, you go past Colonial Road. There is that big complex building called Sports City. It used to be the Bentley Club. There was a tennis club in there. One of our most unusual calls, a car coming toward Linglestown on Linglestown Road, ran off the road, ran down the bank, and came in the building, back there in the corner. Ran across the courts and crashed into the wall on the far south side and hit 3 people playing tennis. Can you imagine playing tennis and you look to your side and here comes a car at you? That was a very unusual call. And then, remember the cheers and jeers section in the Harrisburg paper? Linglestown had a mention. We rescued a cat, but not from a tree, from a storm drain. It was down inside a storm drain. Imagine that rescue. That wasn't so easy. And my favorite one, that I was involved with animals on Coons Park Road. It goes by the swimming pool, goes up the hill. As you go by the park, there's a row of trees. During the summer, a few years ago, there were people at the pool, and they heard this massive screeching sound coming from one of the trees. They called the police. The police came to find out what all this screeching was. There was a big squirrel's nest up in the tree. They called us. We brought that Sutphan fire truck that you saw. Raised the bucket up to the tree and discovered that in the nest was a nest of baby squirrels that somehow got their tails all tied together. And they were pulling on each other. Well, that was the screeching. So the guys in the bucket, there were two, lowered the bucket, and they got these big asbestos gloves that we wear when we have a chimney fire. They're big aluminum-colored asbestos gloves, thick gloves. And went up to this nest, and with the scissors that we carry, they cut the tails off of the squirrels. It's the only way they could do it. And then all the screeching stopped. So I was there for that one. I remember this one very well. So we have unusual calls, and those were three I thought you might find interesting. Okay, on a sad note, we have had fatalities. The worst fatality we ever had, Brian, you were there, was at LaRue Street and Mountain Road. The house has been torn down. There's another new house there. On the southwest corner, this house was on fire the weekend after Thanksgiving in 1986. 1986. The kitchen, yes, the kitchen was here. They went to bed at...
No, kitchen's on the far side.
On the other side.
Kitchen's on the other side.
Oh, I thought the kitchen was here.
No.
Okay.
That's the living room.
Well, you were inside. You would know.
Yes, sir.
The bedrooms were up here. The father and the mother's bedroom, Brian, yes, was here.
No, down farther.
Here.
When we pulled up...
Because they came out on the roof.
Right. When we pulled up with the engine, Stenson Miller and his wife were on that porch, pacified, put a ladder up, and they were coming down. The girl that I removed from the building, that was her daughter. She was in this first room as I let the team in. And one shout out to Mayor Reed. When myself and Tom Freisinger rescued this girl, this is before I was accident.
She was the one that was in critical condition.
Kathy Miller.
Yes, because she'll eventually die.
She did die, thank goodness.
The caption says about 2 that were killed,
Yes.
with 1 critically wounded, injured.
Yes. When I brought her out, did CPR to her. A township detective at that time witnessed the thing and recommended me for the Red Cross Life Saving Award.
What you got from Mayor Reed.
Well, what had happened was my CPR card had expired, so they couldn't give me that. But Mayor Reed, who saw this and was aware of this, gave the highest honor that the city gives their firefighters, gave that to myself and Tommy Freisinger. I always respected Mayor Reed for that. That was something he wouldn't have had to do, but he brought Tommy Freisinger out in front of their council meeting in front of that and gave us that award. Always remember
So
that.
this was our most serious fire involving fatalities. We lost 3 young people by accidents. And you will remember this in 2002. At the curve, just before you get to Central Dauphin High School on Linglestown Road. Late at night, pitch black, 2 youth were driving into West Hanover Township, driving east. They had bought pizza at Leo's Pizza.
Yeah, pizzas came from Pizza Hut, or from down at where Papa John's is.
Oh, I thought they had, okay. They were racing home to keep the pizza warm.
And they lost control.
And they were drunk. As they went around that curve, they went up on the bank, and the car turned sideways. Now imagine the road is coming this way, you're coming toward Linglestown. Going down that road toward Central Dauphin is a car at night, sideways. They were speeding, coming up the road, away from Central Dauphin, were 2 cars. In the first car were 6 young people, all related. The car behind them were their parents. They were going to the movies.
They just left dinner at Rachel's.
I'm sorry?
They just left dinner at Rachel's.
Uh-huh. Yes, close to where Rachel, what is it now? Igor's or something like that. Okay, Ergos, that's it. Where that curve is. The car that was going down the road was going so fast, sideways, but the lights were shining into the field. So coming up, they didn't see anything coming at them. It hit that car, T-bone type, and their car, with the two drunk drivers, was propelled up into a tree. When we arrived there, now you have to kind of imagine this. It was pitch black. There are no street lights there still today. I was driving the rescue truck, that one that we reconfigured, the New York City pumper with the back. It had a huge light tower between the cab and the body. I raised the light tower and turned on this massive light. Until that happened, all we heard was screaming. We heard all this screaming, and we had no idea what was going on. When the lights went on, we saw what had happened. The screaming was from the parents. 5 of the 6 children in that car were killed. The driver lived. In the car that caused the accident, the driver lived. He's in jail to this day. His passenger was killed. 6 young people were killed because of a drunk driver. This is a state record. There has been no accident in Pennsylvania to match this, unfortunately.
They were friends of mine.
Yeah. The two pictures,
So, right here in Linglestown, we have this history.
the 2 pictures at the end of those are the 2 individuals that were in Boyd Gauss's car. The first 4 are the victims that were in the car that was hit by Boyd Gauss's.
Rocky, the driver, was engaged to Nicole and they had a little boy. He still has problems to this day and he's still having surgeries from this accident.
Isn't he
Same
still
with my
in a
friend's
wheelchair?
son.
What's
And then
that?
there's
Isn't Rocky
okay.
So, this was a terrible accident, and it's a record, unfortunately, for all of Pennsylvania, right here in Linglestown. All because of drunk driving. Okay, for the future, and we're done. This is, for me, this is so exciting because I feel this. And hopefully you can too, because you're part of our community. We have a future that is bright. We have great volunteers. We have an average, every month we hear this, for the month that just ended, January, we have an average of 8 firefighters that respond to every call. Sometimes more, sometimes less. 8. Daytime, middle of the night, bad weather, and 2 fire police officers. That's our average, 8 and 2. I feel very good about that, and I think you should too. We have a great junior fire program. Young people can join at the age of 14 through 18. Child labor laws control this, and learn about firefighting. Then they become firefighters. The people that I showed you earlier, firefighters, a number of those people started as junior firefighters. Brian, you didn't. You started as a full firefighter. Bill, you started as a full firefighter. Okay. And then our fire police, as I said earlier, we're one of the only fire companies that has this kind of organization to protect the scene when something is going on. Accidents. They're out in all kinds of weather. And they're there usually as we get there, but they stay later until the scene is really settled. We go, they stay. Our fire policemen are really amazing people. Our ladies auxiliary, I don't know what to say about them. Without our ladies, we would not be what we are. And it's been through our whole history. We have unique equipment. I'll show you a couple more pictures quickly. Our facilities are just top rate. And community support, both from people like you and from our township. Wow, how lucky, how fortunate we are. Let me show you just a couple pictures. Group scenes of our firefighters. Old guys, older guys, younger guys, all different ages. We have such a mix. At our meetings per month, we have about 40 people that come to our meetings. We have good support of our guys. Our junior fire company, there's Artie Hope. Artie's still a member. This is from 1964, no, June of 1968, when our junior program was starting. And there are the kids, some of the guys in the community, young kids, washing the old 61 Ford and the old GMC tanker. We have a junior fire program, and it works. Our great ladies, oh, our great ladies, where we would be without them, I have no idea. Unique equipment. We have our own snowplow. That's a snowplow. So if we get heavy snow, we don't have to wait for the township to plow a route for us to get somewhere. We have our own snowplow to do this. It's a former township truck that we purchased. We have our fire police vehicle. That's just for fire police. Now we have a new vehicle. This one has just recently been traded. Our rescue truck. This is our newest rescue truck, an American LaFrance, just for rescue work. Most fire companies have no rescue. They have to call somebody to do this. We do this. Now, with all these different activities we do, that also takes training. Training is a big, big, big challenge today. And the more we do of different things, the more training we have to have. And this is a big challenge for our guys. Our tanker. This is our tanker today. Massive tank, stainless steel, responds all over the area. It was very busy this week with these big fires that there were. We have a brush truck, our ATV unit. Just an amazing vehicle, and we have a trailer to carry it in. It goes to mountain fires, it goes to rescues. We've rescued people in trees that have been hiking through the forest and decided to climb trees and get caught in the tree or have a medical emergency. We get called for that. This is unique equipment for us. And lastly, Polly, you recognize that? Where's Polly? Polly, you recognize that?
Oh, yeah.
From our 250th anniversary that we had, we did this thing with raccoons. Some of you were involved in that. This was the fire company's raccoon that we created for the sesquicentennial that we had in 2015. Okay, so thank you very much. If you have questions, if you have comments, I'd love to hear them, or we can just talk afterwards. This went a little longer than I wanted to, but there was a lot to talk about. So thank you very much for coming. I'm really happy to be here. Are there any questions or comments? Somebody has a memory. I can give you a mic. As I said earlier, the number 35 is our station number. There are about 40, I think 42 fire companies in the county, and each have a number that they're identified with. So all our equipment is 35 something. Oh, it's a sound by the county. Colonial Park's 33. Usually they follow a route. They follow a battalion. I guess it's battalion numbers, the 30s. Make up the battalion 3. So Colonial Park's 33, Paxtonia's 34, Linglestown's 35. Questions, comments? Come up and see things. Yes, ma'am.
What did you say the connection is between the home association now and the fire company?
No connection.
So you don't get any money from them?
They give us, all their profit comes to us.
So they're
Just as at the Legion, the home association runs the catering, the kitchen, the bar, all that sort of thing. The money from that goes to the Legion.
Okay, by the
But they're
way,
separate organizations.
their dinner is tomorrow night. They have one tomorrow night, lasagna, $8.
That's right. There's a sign out front for lasagna.
Okay, I just,
Fish fries.
I don't want to cut this off, but this has just set a record as our longest meeting. I do want to thank Bill very, very much. I think we're all well informed.